Nurtured this evening, nurtured by the important work of Professor Abhishek Kumar, whose own learning journey is quite inspiring. He began as a student of engineering, technology, and then he embraced the path of management. But with being a student of management, and when people realized that it would really blossom in so many talking about the experience of transdisciplinarity, sometimes it happens as a miracle. And search for something and interesting questions, they come with us, and many flowers blossom. So it is really inspiring working with Professor Abhishek Kumar and see the way he's he taught at the School of University of Design, I think Ananta University in Ahmedabad, and he has explored the dimensions of poetry, space, and these are very important concerns. Art, architecture, and all this is related to the very path of a livable life. And therefore, architecture is related to the way we dwell in our world. And Professor John Clammer also has embodied such a deep quest of looking at space and the sense of aesthetics. I remember his essay, Philosophy on the Stone, that he wrote some years ago, reflecting upon the philosophy of Wittgenstein as it relates to the notion of space and architectural design. So we invite Professor Abhishek Kumar.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Kind of getting, cultivated or rather prepared as a book. And when I met Professor Clammer 2 days ago, and I shared your work, and he got very interested. So then with this, so we look forward to a beautiful evening of learning together. So greetings from Maitri Ashram, Lucknow, where I'm staying in an interesting community. And in fact, the idea of an alternative architecture is related to communities, communities of life, communities of aspiration. So with this, Professor Abhishek Kumar, please.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for the beautiful introduction to the topic. And my thoughts go back to, sir, the time that I met you at Shimla at the Indian Institute of Advanced Study. And just like you were inspiring, the place was equally inspiring, and not to mention its architecture. So, over a period of time, like as you have said, that I started with subjects which are not directly connected to art, aesthetics, and in this case, architecture. But perhaps life has taken me in directions which has brought me face to face with issues where I have to choose, or where I had to choose what is more important to me. And somehow that those choices have brought me here, where uh, art expressions like architecture is has become a matter of concern. And one more point I must mention is my time at Ahmedabad. While I was teaching design and architecture at the university, but what was exciting to me was the place itself, the kind of refined or heightened sensibility that the place has for architectural expressions. So I find the city of Ahmedabad quite an inspiring uh, aspect of my life. Today's dialogue, like it is titled, uh, we will keep it like a dialogue. But before we begin, I would just like to show a few slides and maybe initiate some thinking, uh, and then uh, uh, Professor Clammer and the others, we can perhaps have a discussion, a dialogue, sharing of thoughts, because architecture is something uh, that all of us um, uh, get engaged to when we are in its presence. And a poor architecture uh, may not help us notice or make us notice, but a beautiful architecture, a good quality architecture will definitely make us sit up and notice. So it kind of awakens a certain sense in our mind, in ourselves, that in a mundane existence we don't encounter. So with that, I would maybe like to begin, and I will share. I don't have too many slides, and even if slides are there, they are barely there. I mean, there are just a few words in those slides, so that it's easy for all of us. So, is it okay? Can everybody see?
Yes.
Yes. All right. So this is those who are from the field of architecture, you would recognize this building. Um, uh, this is one of the most recognized and most famous building in the whole world, and this is called Falling Waters. All right, and this is the architect of this building is Frank Lloyd Wright. All right. So he is considered one of the greatest architects in the history of architecture. And this, in fact, today is like a mecca, or is like a pilgrimage for the architects to go and see this place. So those who are architects, they would know, they would be familiar. But those who are not, uh, perhaps you can take a few seconds and notice this building a little carefully, how it is nestled in nature, and how nature is a part of this building. And from this, in architecture, there is a term called organic architecture. And later today we call biophilic architecture. So these are new age terms that have come into the field of architecture. But this was the origin. This is the first so-called building from which the school of organic architecture, or biophilic architecture, or architecture that incorporates nature into itself. So I wanted to start with this because what really architects do, or what really architecture must do, in my view, must engage with this question of what is the role of nature in our lives. And when we say nature, it does not mean only forests and water and so on. Nature also means human nature. And how can that be used for the architectural expression? So today, what I thought was, instead of going into abstract concepts, etc., we will just stick to defining architecture, or what really is the task of architecture. What do we think is the task of architecture? That's what I thought we will have the discussion today. And what better way uh, to discuss what is the task of architecture, or how to define architecture, than going to various ways in which famous architects have expressed itself or given their views. So here we will see a few, uh, in some sense, definition of architecture given by renowned or famous architects, or the people who have given shape to this discipline called architecture. So you can see a few definitions here. So, I mean, I don't have to read it like architecture is what architects do, or architecture begins where engineering ends, or architecture is the making of a room, uh, or the way people live can be influenced by architecture. So, of course, these are obvious and not so obvious definitions. But what is important here is, along with these definitions, please look at the picture. And this picture is of a building which perhaps all of us would have visited at some point of time or the other. And this is, of course, Sabarmati Ashram by Charles Correa. But what I would like you to think about is of the time that you have spent in this building. And even if you have not gone, if you have not visited or not seen, just look at the picture and relate this picture to the personality and the philosophy of Gandhiji, and see if there is any correlation. The Spartan look and the texture, the feel, the design, and the Spartan way in which Gandhiji lived his life. Is there a correlation? This uh, uh, hard texture of whether it is the ceiling or the pillars or the floor, and the simple way of seating the bench, and then the walls and so on. So does it indicate towards the kind of life Gandhiji lived and the kind of life he inspired all of us to live? So I feel that if we can think and explore that relationship between who Gandhiji was and what he stood for, and the structure that is representing his life and his thoughts, is there a correlation? And that is where I think we must take our thoughts to. Let me go further. There are some more definitions. So, for example, Zaha Hadid, many of us would know she is a modern architect. She has also designed the parliament of Bangladesh. So she says that there are 360 degrees, and therefore, so she is talking about a rounded view. And then, of course, she is a woman. So we must also think about that what is the role of curves, and what is the role of I mean, what is male aesthetics and or masculine aesthetics and feminine aesthetics, and how do they look at the world, and is it different from I mean, is masculine and the feminine aesthetics or worldview is different in terms of architecture? Then one uh, famous person in the sense all of them are famous, but one particular architect, Mies van der Rohe, the second entry you can see in the screen. This is architecture is the will of the age conceived in spatial terms. Now, he's also someone who said less is more. This is a famous statement made by this architect, Mies van der Rohe. Less is more. Today, we see minimalistic, we see simplistic, we see something very bare. All these ways of looking at form and aesthetic, formed aesthetics or form beauty. Uh, and the fact that it is very simple, whether it is Japanese school or Western school, that simplicity originated by this architect Mies van der Rohe. And look at the definition that he is giving to the discipline, that will of the age. So the spirit of the age, what is the character of this age, and this age or any age, and then that will, that character of that age gets expressed in spatial terms through the architecture. And then a few other definitions, like architecture is the thoughtful making of space by Louis Kahn. Louis Kahn is also the architect who has designed in IIM Ahmedabad, part of IIM Ahmedabad. And then architecture is about trying to make the world a little more like our dream. So that unconscious uh, uh, elements, unconscious elements, the dreamy structures, and the parts that we generally do not uh, pay heed to, or we are not always aware of. Uh, Perhaps if we live in that kind of an architecture, it helps us dream more and be in touch with our dreams. So maybe the Freudian elements of power and energy, uh, can that be lighted through the architectural expressions? And then Frank Lloyd Wright, space is the breath of art. So this again, Frank Lloyd Wright, I have told you the previous building, this is the one which is designed by Frank Lloyd Wright, and it is his statement which says space is the breath of art. This building that you see is of Helsinki University, auditorium of Helsinki University, and it is designed by a Finnish architect, Alvar Aalto. Uh, Let me stop here before we go to some theoretical discussion. And let me stop here and uh, let me ask if anybody here, if you have some thoughts on what uh, I have shared so far. Professor Clammer, would you like to say something? Your views on what is architecture and things like that, or anyone else?
Well, thank you, Professor Kumar. Um, Sorry, the sound is a bit odd. Can you hear me clearly? We have an
Yes,
echo.
we can hear you. We can hear
I
you.
hear you clearly. Good, thank you. Well, thank you so much. Your talk has come at a very opportune moment. I'm teaching a course at the moment here at OP Jindal University on the sociology of architecture. For a mixture of students from the architecture school, from fine arts, and from liberal arts, where a lot of these same issues are coming up one way or another that you already mentioned. Again, I know you're going to talk more, so let me just make 2 or 3 openly comments, and then I'm sure we come back to this. I think there's a growing consensus that actually design and ethics are very closely related. We are deeply affected not only by large-scale design and embodied in architecture, but in small things. My coffee cup, my pen, the shape of my chair, this kind of thing, really do affect our lifestyle, our quality life, our sort of subjectivities, and all sorts of things of this kind. Yeah. Um, and I think it's great that you've opened up that question in relation to architecture. I mean, that architecture is ethics, because one point I slightly disagree with you. I agree that beautiful architecture does move us, but I personally get very much moved. It creates ugliness. It creates all sorts of problems of this kind. Yeah. A second thought is that at one taught I taught at the Bauhaus in Germany, in Weimar, where there were two interesting ideas that I thought are still very relevant. One was that the division between art and craft should be abolished. These are not distinctive forms of approach to design and to art, to architecture at all. On the one hand, and on the other hand, that architecture, in a sense, was for people. There was very much an attempt to create low-cost housing, for example, that met very high design standards. That public housing didn't have to be bad; it could be good. There's just a few introductory thoughts. Of course, in class, we discussed some of the issues you just raised about the nature of architecture. And one of the things we like to look at a little bit are what architects write about, not only what they design in terms of the physical, the actual physical building. In some cases, they're visionary architecture, buildings that are never built, but also what they write. Because I think the comments you made about the idea of architecture shaping the world, or possibly embodying in some material form our dreams, is very appropriate. So thank you. Let me stop there. I'm sure other people have, or we can come back later for more dialogue if you'd like to go on from here.
So thank you. What I take from your and I will try to build upon what you have said. So one is architecture and ethics. Second is art and craft. And third is, what do architects write about? Uh, I think these are the three points that I have taken, which we can work with as we progress. So let me come back to and I feel that at least in this presentation, one or two I will be able to say something with the help of uh, some of these slides. So just a second. Yes. Yes. So this is where we were, and then uh, what Professor Clammer has said uh, on various issues, the three that I have, yes, the three that I have said: ethics, art and craft, and what do architects write about? Now, I will not uh, try to say something about them directly, but I hope that what is there on the screen will be able to indicate some uh, answers towards those questions. So for example, when Tadao Ando is saying that people live, the way people live can be directed by architecture, or architecture is the making of a room. Now, making of a room can be a sensitive act. All right. Or when architecture begins where engineering ends. So where instrumentality ends and life begins. I mean, it can be seen like that. And what really is this life that we are talking about? And will of the age conceived in spatial terms. So when we say will of the age, it includes the contemporary ethics. Like the ethics of today is different from the ethics of 100 years back, the age 100 years back, 19th century or 18th century. So I feel that architecture, at least the way Mies van der Rohe conceives it, should ideally reflect the ethics of the times. But let me move forward and come to the next slide. Now, in my view, see, we are discussing philosophy of architecture. We are not discussing theories of architecture. So, and there is a difference. The difference is that philosophy of architecture uh, acts as an input for the theory creation or theory formation. So, what we are discussing will go as a raw material for the formation of theory. So, therefore, we will not uh, deal with theory too much, because because theory is perfect. As long as it is valid, it is perfect. But we are dealing with the theory making in the field of architecture. Now, in my view, architecture broadly has two parts. One is form and second is ideas. And it's not something original that I am saying. It is obvious, form and ideas. But the form also, if you look at the form, whether it is a cubical form or a cylindrical form or any form, a dome form or minarets and so on, any form. So any form will have a theoretical proposition, which is the stability, which is the strength, and so on, and then which ensures the stability and strength and so on. And then the material aspect, that which shape it will take, which material, which texture, stone, iron, and so on and so forth. So form will broadly have at least these two parts, and the ideas will also have, in my view, in the context of architecture, relationship between humanity and its conception of natural world. Now here, as I have said in the first slide, natural world does not mean only nature in the concrete sense. uh, like Hegelian. I mean, if you recollect the Hegelian definitions of aesthetics, and he creates a hierarchy that the beauty of nature is the lowest form of aesthetics, and then he goes up in the hierarchy, and he reaches a place where he talks about the beauty of a temple, And the beauty of a temple is because there is an idol inside who is supposed to be God. So the beauty of the temple is from the idol of the god, or the god who is supposed to live inside that temple. So the aesthetics of nature, which is forest and trees and water and so on, to the spiritual aesthetics. So that kind of hierarchy is something that I am trying to mention here under the category of ideas. And second is relationship among humans. So how do people come together and how do they live with one another? And in close proximity. I mean, what is important here is close proximity, because I mean, people living far away and connected through only technology does not really make a home or make a city. But the close physical proximity necessitates them to live in a space, and then the design of the space influences their relationship or shapes their relationship. So what I'm trying to say is that architecture has broadly form and ideas, and form has these two parts, and ideas has these two parts. And when we say under the idea, so one is the nature. So and here I would the point relationship between humanity and its conception of natural world. I will relate to Mies van der Rohe's architecture is the will of the age conceived in spatial terms. So I will relate it to that. And the next one, relationship among humans, which produces a city. And when we say a city will include the house where we live in. City will include various buildings that is integral to a city becoming a city. So what I'm trying to say is that architecture must, and especially philosophy of architecture, must deal with these broad four categories of thought for architecture to become architecture. So this is one broad structure of philosophy of architecture that I wish to present. Next slide. Again, as I have said earlier, we are not going to discuss architectural theory, because we are talking of philosophy of architecture and not the theories of architecture. And perhaps we can do a critical examination of architecture theory, but that's not really the scope of today's discussion. But what we do need to think about, and particularly in the context of what Professor Clammer has said, implications of the changing needs of society, evolving frameworks of thinking, and changing patterns in taste. How do these three get incorporated in architecture? How they must be incorporated in architecture so that architecture is able to serve its purpose. Uh, and I think because this can be done only when we are able to give some kind of or arrive at some kind of a definition of what really architecture should do. Because unless we do that, we will it will become difficult to give concrete shape to architecture, keeping in mind the changing needs of society, evolving frameworks of thinking, and changing patterns. So we are moving towards a definition of architecture. We have many definitions. I am trying to give one more, is what I am trying to say here. Now, for this, what I have done is I have gone to one of the fundamental works in architecture, and that is this book called Space, Time and Architecture by S. Gideon, Siegfried Gideon. And as per him, this book was published in 1941. So this is sometime, this is around the same time of Bauhaus and but of course, architecture is a far older discipline than design. But still, this is a definitive work on what is one of the fundamental works on architecture, and all of us, anyone who is interested in the discipline of architecture, must engage with this. So as per this book, also, and this is a textbook for many schools in architecture. So to interpret a way of life valid for our period, and then also have measures of such validity. So, of course, to have a way of life valid for that. Again, the same thing what Mies van der Rohe is saying, that's will of the age interpreted in spatial terms. So one is not only a validity, but measure of such validity, and something more interesting, replacement of good, bad with interesting, boring. So this is nothing but perhaps maturation of mankind and his tastes and his preferences and his lifestyle. So instead of being very violent and saying this is good and this is bad, can we move to a more subtle expression and disposition where we say it is interesting or boring? Another aspect, of course, is the role of technology and objectifying rationality. Now, again, role of technology is obvious. I mean, because of the overwhelming nature of its force, we have to incorporate technology. But my more concern, greater concern, is objectifying rationality. Now, rationality today and the rationality of Kant and the rationality of, say, Jesus Christ are obviously different. And how can we objectify that rationality through the architecture? And one beautiful example, or one beautiful expression of objectified rationality, is the works of Le Corbusier in Chandigarh. Not only Chandigarh, I mean any work of Le Corbusier. If you see, it is engineers' aesthetics. If you go to Chandigarh and see his buildings, or his buildings in Ahmedabad, or his buildings anywhere in the world, we will see that it is very industrial. It is very engineered. It is something like you don't need decoration anymore. It should be very plain and simple so that people go about their work in a most efficient manner, the way a machine works. So if you see the next point, reduction of houses into efficient machines, landscape into techno space, loss of essence of dwelling, and loss of beauty, stroke loss of ourselves. So objectifying rationality, if we say that we are becoming more machine-like, and technology is overwhelming us, and therefore our life is more, we live in a techno space uh, instead of a space which is organic, and so on. Uh, so if we keep all that in the context, I feel that objectifying rationality is one of the fundamental tasks before architecture. Let me move further. Uh, so, transforming us into increasingly rootless, isolated, and displaced persons. Now, this is again spirit of the times, and this is how society is moving. And therefore, what does architecture do? And we can see around us what is happening with architecture, and it is perhaps indicative towards how will architecture respond to such changes in society. Then between yes and no to technology, we have to put it in. That's fine. I mean, space of technology, uh, and therefore uncertainty within architecture. So, like Professor Clammer has said, what do architects write about? And I think a lot of writing by the architects is about not just the thought and the form, the connection between the idea that governs the form, and the form that governs the idea, or form and function, as we have studied. But I think they are writing a lot about the role of technology and use of various instruments and technologies, and how life needs to be interpreted, and so on, because architecture itself is an impure art. And when we say impure art, it means that it is a combination of physics. It's a combination of fluid dynamics. It's a combination of aesthetics. It's a combination of sculpture, philosophy, and so on. Broadly in architecture, we can easily say there are disciplines that architecture contains. Some disciplines belong to left side of the brain, and some disciplines belong to the right side of the brain. So, and in that sense, I am calling it an impure art. And architecture, uh, it has always uh, engaged with, like Professor Clammer said, sociology and architecture. So it has engaged with subjects or disciplines within humanities and within social sciences, and also natural sciences. For example, when we say biophilic architecture or organic architecture, it does get inspired by various forms in the nature and so on. And then laboratories. So architectural studio is laboratories that encourage bounding of spaces in exploratory and creative ways. So architecture studio uh, uh, must be seen as laboratories, and the architects are the scientists who are working with space as the raw material. So and then the basic tools, etc. We know what are the tools of architecture and structural engineering, engineering facts. Is it art or is it art like? And then there is also something called fantasy architecture or landscape architecture. Fantasy architecture, like you may have heard of an architect called Gaudi, Gaudi, and he has a great church in Spain, and all his works are fall in the realm of fantasy architecture. But the more fundamental question here is, architecture, is it art or is it art like? And that is a question that we must think about. And that is why let me stop here. Is architecture art or art like? Let me stop with this question and let me come back to all of you. So maybe I invite some comments on what I have said so far. And also, is what do you think? Is architecture art or is it art like? Yes. Anyone, would anyone like to say something? Is architecture art or is it art like?
Well, they're all quiet. So shall I come back again? To wait till we come back. So I think that exactly the point you raise is extremely interesting, exactly because um, it's a synthesis in a way of those things, right? I mean, clearly it's the technological side, yeah. And unlike here at OP Jindal, we don't have an engineering department. And see, in the Bauhaus, in its contemporary manifestation, as it were, uh, the school has a school of architecture, a school of fine arts, a school of media, and a school of civil engineering. The idea is again and again, I think this sort of cultural thing here, having lived in Japan for a long time, where an awful lot of architecture is actually seen essentially as a branch of engineering. Um, Not by any means, but there are obviously people like Ananta now, who you mentioned, of course, don't fall into that kind of category. Um, so, it seems to be the perfect synthesis of technology, materials, of course, an important dimension of this, as well as the aesthetic dimensions. Yeah. Um, but what you said stirred up a couple of other ideas. If I can talk for another minute or two. Um, one of the things I try to persuade my students to do is to look at the social, political, economic context. Um, in class last night, we were discussing, amongst other things, Frank Gehry's iconic Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao, which everybody doesn't know it, can look it up. And indeed, the word deconstructionism came up, how we relate his work, in fact, to the whole sort of postmodern ethos and that kind of dimension. But two other thoughts for you as well. Well, one thing that interests me a lot is vernacular architecture. Architecture which does not necessarily arise out of conscious design processes in the contemporary architectural sense. I wonder what lessons we can learn from that as well about the issues that you've raised. So that's kind of a question for you as well. But I'm sure other people have thoughts they would like to share.
Yes. Uh, in case anybody would like to share your thoughts, or I'll continue, and maybe in the end we can invite others to come with their thinking, their thoughts. Yeah, this idea of vernacular uh, architecture, and I somehow relate that to the relationship between art and craft. Your earlier point of the relationship between art and craft, and the relationship between architecture and vernacular architecture, or Western or theoretical architecture and vernacular architecture. So one has perhaps the smell of the earth, and the other is trying to rediscover the smell of the earth. So something like that is what comes to my mind when I think of vernacular architecture. But let me continue. Um, yeah. Yes. So this is where we were. And then what I want to do is I want to see the question that I had asked was, is architecture art or art like? And what are your thoughts on it? And particularly because earlier I had mentioned Freud, and then Professor Clammer has also mentioned how architecture relates to sociology, politics, power equations in society, and then various ethos related to various religions, and so on. So keep all of that in mind, and then I'm going to show you a few architectural objects, and take a look, maybe dwell for a few seconds on those designed objects or architectural marvels, and keep it in your mind when we move forward to subsequent slides. So this, of course, all of us have seen, so I will not spend much time on this. Uh, so this is the falling water building, a house by Frank Lloyd Wright. Then the next building is this. This is a uh, uh, this is actually the Louvre Museum in Abu Dhabi. So this is the Arabic edition of, or interpretation of, Louvre, and it is done by an architect called Jean Nouvel. Now, many of you would be aware that there is an award in architecture.
Sorry, they're not showing on the screen. We only have your opening slide, which says
Oh,
philosophy of
oh,
architecture.
one second, one second, one second. Uh, are you able to see the slide now?
Yeah, but only the first slide, that is the philosophy of architecture. So,
Oh, okay. One second. This is strange.
You would just have to tap down.
One second. Can you see? Can you see different pictures? Slides changing?
No, no, you have to change the slide.
Yeah, I'm changing the slides.
maybe you have to share it again.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, right now I am not sharing. Is that fine?
Yes.
Okay, now. Uh, Can you see the slide?
Yes, that
This
is philosophy of
architecture as
architecture. Yes,
form and ideas.
yes,
You can
yes,
see this.
yes,
Are you seeing the changing slides?
yes,
So can you see now Louvre, Abu Dhabi?
yes,
Okay, all right, all right. So, so this is the Louvre Museum in Abu Dhabi, and it is created or designed by an architect called Jean Nouvel. And many of us would know that in architecture, there is a prize called Pritzker Prize, which is considered equivalent to Nobel Prize in architecture. Jean Nouvel is also one of the winners of Pritzker Prize. And most interestingly, he wrote one book, Jean Nouvel, and name of the book is The Singular Objects of Architecture. And it's an amazing, it's actually a conversation between Jean Nouvel and Michel Foucault. And those of us who are interested in this space of intersection between philosophy and architecture, it would be interesting for you to look at that work, Singular Objects of Architecture. So this building was designed by Jean Nouvel, and you can make your own interpretation of this building. I mean, how the original Louvre is and how the Louvre in Abu Dhabi is. So this is one building I wanted to show you. Another building is Sept University by B.V. Doshi. Many of us would know. He is also a Pritzker Prize winner. And this is a famous building in Ahmedabad. It is Sept University, which is a college of architecture. And I mean, you see how he has designed a place which is meant for perhaps encounters, how people will meet one another and yet be secluded, or yet have their personal space, and if they move forward they will meet each other and so on. So what I'm trying to say is that how ideas and form, both of them are getting combined for a purpose which is life itself, and not just life but designing of life, and something like that is what I am trying to say. This is another building. It is by Le Corbusier, and it is also in Ahmedabad, and it is often it is called Atma building, but actually it is I mean, when I met the director of this building, he said that no, don't call it Atma building. Atma building is actually Ahmedabad Textile Mills Association. But he said, no, don't call it Atma building, call it Mill Owners Association building. So this is a beautiful building. And in fact, when I went there, my first thought was it's not really a building, it is a sculpture. And an overgrown sculpture, or a large, or a sculpture which is of the size of a building. Now, if you can see this building, how, I mean, the way the lattice of the facade is made, it is called brise soleil in architectural parlance. Brise soleil means the sun rays. Soleil is sun, and brise is brilliance of the sun. So how the sun rays are blocked by this angled windows, and so on. So it is called Brise Soleil, and it's not a very big building. I mean, if you go inside, I mean, barely say 20 steps and it ends. And you can see it is very, from outside, it is very conical, and it is very, say 90-degree angles, and so on. But inside there is a hall, there is an auditorium, which is round, which is in the shape of a oval shaped auditorium, almost like a womb. So it is often said that it's a combination of masculine and feminine worldview or energy. So outside it is masculine, but inside it is feminine. So what I'm trying to say is that see how architecture is combining the fundamental aspects of human life, and giving it a form which is almost edifying. I mean, it is something like you are erecting an idea, and that idea is about how one should live one's life. So it is here, I think, in the context of this, the ideas like ethics, power, politics must get interpreted, and then see how that gets incorporated in the field of architecture. So one thing you can do is you can think of a building in your own life, and see how you would like to look at as an art, or as an art like. I mean, is it an art, or is it an art like building? And one good example is our own home. And what do we consider our home? I mean, home may not be an architectural marvel, but what do we call it? I mean, uh, is it art? Is it art like? It is none of that. Is it all of it? And so on. And then there is also a question in architecture that is architecture something more than a decorated shed? And this is also because nowadays there is so much of focus on interior design, and interior design, uh, I mean, it is something like a decoration, and which is perhaps an imposition, an imposed decoration. So is it more than, is architecture something more than a decorated shed? And here I would like to take you to the definition given by Louis Kahn, when he says that architecture is the making of a room. All right. So it is not just uh, uh, decorating or making the room beautiful, but it is an act of making of a room, and so on. So what I'm trying to say uh, is it something more than a decorated shed? And then, as I said, Corbusier defined a house. So since we are talking of a house, Le Corbusier said that a house is a machine for living in. So he thought of house as a machine, and he designed houses like anyone would, like an engineer would design a machine. So what I'm trying to say is, that uh, does house come with machine aesthetics, and something like that? And therefore, what is successful living? Is successful living uh, does successful living mean that we achieve the efficiency of a machine? Is that successful living? Or, and accordingly, the relationship with ethics would change. Let me move further. Uh, so essence of essentially we are trying to discuss what really is the essence of architecture. And in my view, uh, this deep uncertainty, that our ability to be uncertain, and acknowledge that we are not sure how we should live, and in that uncertainty, that uncertain state of mind, I think we should try and discover the sense of architecture, the essence of architecture, and give it a form, which of course will be uh, spirit of the time. It will be in keeping with the spirit of the times, and in spatial terms, etc. But we must also not forget that it cannot be just an aesthetic problem. Okay, a building just does not have to only look beautiful. It cannot be limited to being an aesthetic problem. It is also an ethical problem. And it will be seen as an ethical problem only if we can uh, grasp that uncertainty about how we should live our life. So that is a question, and that is a dilemma that I think architects and those who engage with architecture as a discipline must grapple with. So final slide, and this is the final slide after which we can have a discussion. So what I am trying to say is that, and historically that has also been the case, that architecture has tried to free itself from the aesthetic approach. So if you see old Victorian and Elizabethan architecture and old architecture of any country, they were very ornate, they were very aesthetic, very detailed, and so on. But since 18th century, consciously architects have tried to make it simpler. And one good example is Wittgenstein. Wittgenstein was also an architect. At least he listed himself as an architect, and he also designed one building, even though that building he designed was for his sister. But that building, the architect of that building was Wittgenstein, and he was a student. He considered himself a student of another architect called John Loos, sorry, Adolf Loos, and LOOS. And that is a very Spartan, simple architecture. From outside, it is very simple, but from inside, it is quite rich. But from outside, so what I'm trying to say is that architecture has consciously tried to free itself from the aesthetics or contemporary aesthetics, and that has dominated architectural theory and practice. So what architects are writing about is also that freeing themselves from the aesthetics of the times, aesthetics of the past, and they are trying to create aesthetics of the future, which is perhaps inclusive, and all the terms that nowadays we hear, like DEI, diversity, DEI, inclusiveness, diversity, and ethics. So that, and then we must question the divorce of beauty and utility, art and reality. So does architecture really needs to choose a side between beauty and utility? Can it not combine both, or art and reality? And therefore, after the entire discussion, what seems to me is the main task of architecture is that it should edify, and edify in the broadest sense of the term. Uh, Edification of life, edification of man, edification of human knowledge, edification of form, edification of what a human being can create. So, in my view, uh, and I think in some sense it has always been like that, that architecture edifies human capability in the form of, I mean, it's in a larger than life form. So I think I would stop here, and I think I would limit myself, or I would try to state the task and the purpose of architecture as edification. So let me stop here, and let me come back to everyone and hear your thoughts and feelings. Mhm. Yeah. Professor Giri, Professor Clammer, what are your thoughts on this?
Hello, Abhishek. Thank you. I
Yes,
am
sir.
hearing. I am looking forward to a few more reflections,
Yes,
and
sir.
I would after a few more thoughts from our circle.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Definitely.
Now let us have some more conversations. Minati, you can co-nurture.
Thank you, Randhir. Uh, I can invite, there I see the name, some Chemakari Indira Dasgupta. Ma'am, please unmute and please share your reflections. Hello, am I audible?
Yes, yes,
Yes.
we can hear you.
Yeah, I was just requesting Ma'am Indira Dasgupta to, to share some of her reflections. Okay, since taking a little bit time, we may invite
No, I
Professor
was trying to
Ganvi.
unmute. I
Yeah, please,
just,
please. Yeah,
um,
carry on.
yeah, greetings. I'm a student of CEPT University, and uh, AIT from Thailand, the Asian Institute of Technology. Just reflecting on what I heard, I was just curious as to what we define as architecture when we say philosophy. Did architecture exist before the Bauhaus, or did architecture exist before architects, and will it now exist after architects? Because architecture seems to be a diminishing field. Um, Also, the whole question of the term architecture has been incorporated in the computer world so much, and do they really understand also what is architecture beyond the physical form? What is this seems to be an arbitrary set of questions, but really to take into the understanding of architecture, where I usually had heard of form and function, and this time I'm hearing of form and ideas, which I do not quite understand so much. So, the whole idea of conceptualizing a particular form and saying that one building is architecture, is that what we are really talking about? And how narrow are we architects becoming in the definition of architecture? These are questions that came to my mind while thinking of the philosophy of architecture.
All right. So let us hear from someone else.
Yeah, thank you. May I request Professor Ganluji? Ganluji, please, you can
Yes,
unmute and
thank you
share.
very much. I have unfortunately some problems with the connection today, and I cannot make the video. I'm sorry, but there is bad weather here where I am, and I cannot do a better. I cannot find a better connection. Yes, well, I thank you very much. It was very interesting. Unfortunately, I am not an expert in the subject, but I remember very many things, so which I studied at school. Unfortunately, not in a very deep way, I must admit. Well, as regards, for instance, the definition of architecture which I read of Miss van der Rohe, one thing that always struck me when I read it, when I read it the first time, when I read it the first time, and when I read it is that once when he had to define architecture, he said that there is the architecture is the way to put a brick after the other one, which at first sight, at first hearing, uh, was a little bit mysterious for me. Then I thought that he wanted to say that the first condition of the architecture is the order, and of course also the correct environment, the finding of the correct environment, of the correct harmony between what is being built and the circumstances, the surroundings, so to speak. I think that well, what I must like, for instance, of Miss van der Rohe is the Villa Tugendhat, which is not far from Vienna, where I am, and because I unfortunately could not see it, could not visit it, but it was at that time, so to speak, a revolution, a milestone in the architecture as a revolution. A milestone was the house of right on the waterfall, for instance, which we could see in one of the first slides, the first one, I think, if I am not mistaken, or the second one. No, it was very interesting, of course. The problem with architecture is huge. I cannot put now a precise question, perhaps with an exception that is there was, as far as I know, in the architect Le Corbusier, not only, so to speak, the attempt to make architecture, because he made architecture of churches, for instance, in the north of France, with the church which is very, very famous, like a foil of a tree, or the skyscraper of Marseille, or the Villa Savoie, which is next as regards the conception to the Villa Tugendhat, for instance, has similarities. But well, what I saw, for instance, Le Corbusier was also the attempt to make a sort of harmony between architecture and urbanistic environment. For instance, when he was going to make the project of Chandigarh, for instance, it was very, very important what he made, not only as regards the particular project of the edifices of the building, but also as regards the way in which Chandigarh had to be built. This not only a project of the singularities of the architecture, but also a project for our urbanistic environment in which the buildings had to find their place. And I think that this project of, in a way, reconciling architecture and urbanistic, or at least to not to limit architecture only to the questions of the building, of the particular building, but also to have a project about the urbanism, or the urbanistic environment in which the buildings are built, is very interesting. Very interesting. As said, I could not put in this moment ask any particular questions. It was very interesting, and of course, I congratulate you very much for your brilliant exposition. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much. Yeah.
Now may I invite, I see one name, Devesh. May I request you, sir, please to unmute and share your reflections. It's taking some time. May I invite Dr. Susri Sangita Mishra? Please unmute and share your ideas or reflection. Susri Appa, please. Okay, she is also taking some time. So Randhir, please, you can share. Hello, am I audible? Randhir, can you please unmute and share your queries or any reflections?
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
But nobody is responding. Ananta bhai, otherwise, Ananta bhai, please, can you
Yes, sir,
share
you can
your...
conclude. Sir, you can conclude.
Hello. Hello, dear friends. Professor Abhishek, Professor Clammer, and friends. Very interesting query. And it is said, Athato Brahma Jigyasa, thus inquiry into Brahman, and therefore this series of questions, what is architecture? Is architecture art or art like? And all these are part of journey of creation, and also the different dimensions of it, and the ethical, the aesthetic, and ideas, form, function. Dr. Dasgupta was talking about this bringing of the idea creates a sense of wonder, how important it is, ideas, and how these ideas are not just functional ideas, they are related to ways of living, like a simple architecture could give more space for self-expression. So therefore, Gandhi, you're showing of Sabarmati Ashram, and therefore, the way of living, the kind of life that we want to live. And so therefore, the other thing about architectural work is that it is becoming co-creative. That earlier we had an image of the architect like corresponding with many other ways of execution. The architect knows it all as the teacher knows it all, or as the development planner knows it all. So there has been a shift from that kind of model of architecture to architecture as a way of co-creation. And also in architectural practice, there is much more dialogue between architect and the kind, and listening is very important. And sometimes some architects, they come with a very heavy a priori planning, but slowly there are also many architects who like to listen to. And this listening is it is a emergent journey, even whom we are going to listen to, because the self is also dynamic. Because if we had a notion of a fixed self, maybe today I hear one kind of voice, and then after a little while I hear another kind of voice. But if the architect is very fixed, then the architect would be immediately dismissive of these kind of changes. But with a little bit of mutuality, it is possible to create a condition for a kind of a emerging architectural co-creation. And the great Dutch philosopher and historian Frank Ankersmit, in his important book in 1996 called The Aesthetic Politics, he makes a distinction between the architect and the maintenance person. And he is bringing with the notion of the architect as a person who knows, who topped out planner, and the maintenance person is much more humble, much more, so contingent. So today in our architectural journey, we need to practice this kind of open architecture. Regarding architecture being an art or art-like, also we realize that architecture is a poetry, and relating to the notion, the reality of the vernacular, and also along with many other dimensions that Professor Clammer has pointed to, power and others. And so if we have today in the Indian context, we see our changing architecture is becoming different. The parliament and the kind of the lion is more aggressive. So with all this, how do we create, an architecture for living, living together, and also the the kind of the plurality that we are talking about. And today, in the name of the postmodern architecture, there is much more dialogue with our many traditions. So it also requires a breakaway from the modernist dominance that we have. It is a difficult journey in India. Therefore, while referring to Corbusier, now was Corbusier inevitable? So to ask this contingent question, what would have happened if Indian architecture was much more, open, and it was not a prisoner of a very, dominant modern. Look at, for example, the difference between Bhutan and India. Bhutan has very interesting modern buildings, and it has creates a sense of. So therefore, today, with the multiple critiques of the modern that is going on, and so the architectural form is part of that. It is in this context the notion of the modern and not becoming a prison of the dualism between tradition and modern, and the work of Henrik Dussel is very significant, who is challenging us to realize that our present day moment is a transmodern moment, in the sense that wherever we are, what Michael Foucault calls as a critical ontology of the present, wherever we are dissatisfied with the dominant thought, and we are trying to draw upon multiple sources. And much more, there is a deep realization of the vernacular now. But this vernacular is not just an ethnocentric project. This vernacular is also part of planetary conversations, a kind of regionalization that is happening. And so different kind of regional traditions could learn with each other. In India also, our Islamic architecture and different parts of India, like Kerala and others. So if we can communicate with each other, and the work of Laurie Becker and many creative practitioners of architecture, and Laurie Becker's project vernacular, at the same time low cost. So, and today the question of cost is also a very important one, and there is a there is a evil alliance, between the engineering, the architectural, and the kind of, if in another context we have spoken about the military industrial complex, and now it is also a kind of the real estate capitalism, and there is no urge to reduce cost. And who are the sufferers? So many people,
Yes,
the
sir,
low
it is
class.
evil in every dimension, whether it is military, commerce, and then engineering.
So then these are some of my
Yes, sir.
interlinking
Yes, sir.
thoughts.
Thank you, sir. Thank
Thank
you very much.
Anybody else wants to share anything? Whomever the names I have called before, or else I'll go with my queries. I mean, my thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your presentation. It was I felt like listening to it was the tip of the iceberg. I mean, you have to go deep to explore many things. But still, I have always, like some queries from here and there. Please pardon me if I ask some immature questions, but I mean, queries. So, you were telling now what makes I want to know what is that difference that makes a sculpture different from a building, if it is not the aesthetic value. That is one thing. So in that sense I would like to ask, can a architecture be only commercial, or it is fundamentally ambiguous? And what are the moral charges? Actually, I wanted to ask that ethical and social dimensions. John sir had asked already. I mean
Yes,
that
yes.
what I believe is the ancient architecture was need based. I mean, it is representing our culture, our need basically. So I mean, you also mentioned one more thing: the relationship with the one another is very much important. In this thing, I was remembering one thing. Once we were just traveling, so that Professor Nadgowda, he was just traveling with us. He was telling, seeing a very skyscraper and telling, just I'm wondering that how much of water will be needed, how much of power will be needed to um, cater to the top floor, like 43 floor, 43rd floor or something like that. I mean, probably you might have written in your books very detailed, but little more, when the architecture design those type of buildings or whatever. I mean, definitely they have to keep sustainability in their mind. Still, do they really think the consequences of the impact on the poor people also, who will be residing next to that, who cannot afford? It can be only like, that is why I asked whether it is only be commercial thing, or it is, I mean, in your last note you said very beautifully, I mean, it is doesn't believe always in aesthetics of a past, present and future, but ethics. So these are the few things I just would like you to clarify. Thank you. And
Thank you.
please, yeah.
Thank you very much. I mean, see, these are the questions that, uh, I mean, they can't really have very clear and easy answers because, I mean,
So
technically we can say,
if I may just
yes, please, please, please,
interject a bit
please.
with Minotti's beautiful summing up. I really feel that Professor Clammer's entire dialogue that he was trying to generate, in that probably architecture in a way reflects the ethos of the times. So whether it is the individual or the community, what gets generated in terms of the habitat more than the architecture, where architecture is a part of the habitat, is really the ethos of the times. And that in India you can see as a continuum, whereas in other places you might see it in silos. And probably in the whole entire South Asia and Asia Pacific region also, you see it as a continuum existing between the various ages, in terms of the urban structure, um, or the habitat. And I would question Professor Clammer to even look at the not only the sociology of architecture, but also the architecture of sociology in the coming days.
Yeah, so nice, very beautifully put. So, see, I feel that see, technical definitions are, of course, there. You can always say, because when there is structure, when there are certain combination of elements, then technically you can call them architecture. But in the end, I have also suggested that architecture must edify. And if we come across a building which we think that it does edify an idea or an effort or something, then perhaps that will have a greater claim to being called an architecture. Another point was that the way IT sector has incorporated architecture as a word, as a phrase. I think what they have incorporated uh, is just a very functional definition of structure or architecture, and I think it is also more fashionable than anything else. So I don't think they have grasped they have perhaps only taken the letter of architecture and not so much the spirit of it. Uh, Professor Giri gave a beautiful exposition on how he thinks architecture must and does relate to life and the role of commerce and technology and capitalist ideology and military warfare, how all of them relate to architecture as a discipline. So I think all of these are worth thinking about, and those who are architects, they have the difficult task of actually grappling with them in real form on a day-to-day basis and see how these ideas influence their work on the ground. So I think
Just
I
an
will.
interjection, small
Yes,
interjection.
yes, yes.
It's just a question that I is emerging in my mind, is that if what we called as fantasy architecture of Gaudi,
Yeah.
was taken to be the normative rather than Le Corbusier, being taken as the normative.
Mhm.
How would we really respond, and how would architecture have grown? Because it is not really fantasy if you really walk through the buildings
Mhm.
where form and function go together, and
Yeah.
the entire elasticity of concrete has been fully explored um, experimented with,
Mhm.
in its beauty, really. So
Yes, yes.
if that really had been taken as a normative, rather than our school, my own alma mater, uh,
Mhm.
taking Corbusier as the standpoint and
Mhm.
going forward with that exploration. So this is just a question that
See,
I'm left
I mean,
with.
like you only said that, see, it is the ethos or the spirit of the times. So, I mean, today we may call or we may label one as normative and other as fantasy. But at that point when it was created, I don't think these labels existed. I mean, they did it because they liked it, and this was their way of interpreting the world. So, but from an institutional point of view, when we have to teach, then we have to label, we have to categorize, and then we also have to justify using theories. So I think perhaps architects, uh, I mean, they should or they can think of more lived experience, what kind of experience they wish to create, rather than worry about these uh, uh, labels as one or the other. So I think it is that lived experience that the structures create is what I think is what matters. Whether it is someone who is living there, passing by it, or is just an onlooker. So for all of them. So
Mhm.
something like that is what comes to my mind.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Now I invite Professor John Clammer to tell some closing remarks. John, sir, please.
Okay, thank you. I think can wrap up. You've raised so many interesting questions, but I think this idea of architecture as experience is, in fact, a very good summary, a way of condensing a lot of these debates. Because I know we could sit here all night and still find we couldn't all probably come up with a definition that we all agreed with. That's true. But I think you also pointed to this question of architecture in its social context. We will see emerging changes, questions like sustainability are now emerging, of course, as key questions, architecture in relation to ecology, for example. And it seems to me one thing, it's just one note to add, if we talk about whether architecture is an art or not, is to think about the way in which art in architecture occurs. Architecture itself is often the context in which art itself, in the more understandable, everyday sense, is displayed. So I would say thank you so much for stirring up these fascinating questions. I think you've given us a lot to think about, especially those of us who work in some related area. So thank you. We're looking forward. I'm certainly looking forward to your book. I would be something I would want my students to read closely. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss some of these ideas and listen to all of you. Thank you for the opportunity.
So Ananta bhai, any closing comments, or I'll just end up with vote of thanks. Ananta bhai, can you hear me?
Yes, now it is time for
We can close now formally. Thank you.
you.
You are not audible.
Yes, please go ahead,
No, you please
Minati.
tell.
Let us
Continue.
Yes, please come to the concluding moment. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I, Minati Pradhan, on behalf of Swadhyaya Sahachakra and Vishwaneedam Center, would like to thank our today's chief speaker, Professor Dr. Abhishek Kumar. Thank you so much, sir, for presenting us a different dimension of architecture. Thank you so much. I also would like to thank Professor John Robert Clammer. He's a family member of Vishwaneedam Center. Thank you so much. Listening to you is always a pleasure for me, for all the participants, I believe so. So thank you so much. I also would like to thank Professor Ganluigi, Mr. Deves, Miss Indira Das Gupta, Dr. Susri Sangita Misra, and the people who have joined us in our Facebook platform and as well as in our YouTube platform. Please pardon me if I've forgotten anybody's name, but I really thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah. Bye. Good night.